Hello and welcome to the Comic Literate podcast, the podcast where we do deep dives into comic books, graphic novels, and penny dreadfuls. Today I'm your host, Jamie, and with me is your gregarious host, Ryan.
You forgot mangas.
Fuck you. Well, fuck you, right?
I bet you, because you did that without any warning. So you were expecting me to be like, oh, bloody hell, I wasn't expecting to do that. But I was like, nope, I picked up exactly the mistake. Without even being ready, I knew exactly where you made the mistake.
How are we?
It's a B at best. B
Do
minus.
you know what, though? You read it off a screen, don't you?
I do.
And, like...
You just heard me saying it about 20 times now?
Yeah, maybe. It's not that impressive, but I'm quite pleased with myself.
I mean, it shows you're paying attention at the very least. I sound like a teacher who's like, no, the good parts of you, you do pay attention at the very least.
We used to call that a shit sandwich when I was teaching.
Oh, yeah. So good. So, yeah, you paid attention, you missed a bit, you're always on time.
Yeah.
We'll put it like that.
The bread are the compliments, and then the cheap sandwich meat filling is your kid's thick.
Also, you stole one of my descriptors, so you couldn't even bring because if you notice, dear listeners, I bring a new one every week, and you didn't do that.
Yeah, but what was it going to be this week?
Do you want to know, or do you want me to save it for next week?
No, I want to know.
I was going to be eloquent.
Oh,
My eloquent co-host.
Oh, that's really sweet.
And now next week is going to be, I'm going to try and find a one-word description for pale imitation. And that's going to be your description from now on.
The doppelganger.
I mean, doppelganger applies like in like identical
in every way, yeah.
What's the one where it's like my intro and your intro are fighting and a third party is holding a gun and both our intros are going, I'm the real one, shoot him. No, I'm the real, like, you know, like...
You mean that Spider-Man frame, don't you?
No, it's more like a trope of like, it's like a general film trope. It's like, shoot the real one.
Yeah.
And then they shoot yours. And then mine goes, how did you know? I was like, they didn't say mangas. And then the screen fades to black.
Yeah. I mean, do you know what, right? I wanted to be a little bit disruptive with the intro, but I knew you'd be really resistant if I did something weird again. Because a new corner that I would like to do right at the top today, and I've not warned you, is...
He hasn't, people, ladies and gentlemen, he has not.
Literally, I want to do Ryan and Jamie's comment of the week.
Right.
And so I'd like to read to you a YouTube comment, and I'm going to find it now.
Was it the really good one or the really bad one?
It was the really bad one.
Oh, brilliant.
So if you remember, we did an episode on the Alan Moore Superman comic. And on our short, Ryan chose to highlight the section where we talked about Superman's dad being a Nazi.
Space Nazi, specifically.
Space Nazi, yeah, absolutely. And I'm just pulling the comment up now, because this is my comment of the week. This commenter said... Oh, Ryan, you're going to have to read it because my YouTube app won't give me the comment. It says no comments yet.
Okay, so I'm going to attempt to... I mean, okay, hang on. Give me a minute. Okay, so the comment that gracefully made its way into our lives was, I'm not going to quote or anything, general rule up top, if do not go seeking out this comment or replying to it. Let's just leave them in the wild.
I mean, it won't be hard to find, but yeah.
But let's just leave them out in the wild, just view from afar like a safari.
Absolutely.
You know, we're not interacting. But
we do not feed the troll.
Exactly, yes. We just laugh about it because it's funny. And this esteemed gentleman, I assume...
Oh, definitely has a penis.
Left a comment on the Superman's dad's a space Nazi, basically saying, and I'll do a voice which I assume it was written with the attitude of. Actually, Nazis were socialists, so they are more related to liberals who are left wings. Wings, plural.
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
Not wing. And we got a good chuckle.
It made my day.
I like the literal interpretation
of National Socialism.
Yes. Because this is the kind of person who, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but the political party, and I use political party in quotes, of North Korea has democratic in the name, doesn't it? It's like the Democratic Party of North Korea or whatever. this is the kind of person who read that go, well, obviously they're a democratic country. The party's got democratic in the name.
It made my fucking day.
It was a good one. It was a good show that people are processing our content
in exactly the way it was intended
and responding in it in a way that makes us feel special. Like we've changed a life, you know?
So today, Ryan, I've kind of like taken over hosting duties and I'm really enjoying it.
I mean, you're enjoying it up until we get to the main part of the episode.
Because today we're talking about a DC comic.
I'll tell you what I'll give you. I'll give you a little something.
Is it a hand job?
No, that'd be a little something, yes, but
oh, that's unkind.
I was trying to connect the bits. I was going to give you at least an opportunity just to say, what is it that reading this comic has taken you away from that you would like to mention?
Well, what is probably going to be the game of the year?
Elden Ring.
No. Do you know what?
I know it came out last year, but it's my game of the year every year.
I keep wanting to call it by the title of its predecessor. I've been playing Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
And it's really good. So we mentioned this up top. We briefly spoke before the podcast because sometimes we have to acknowledge each other before we start recording.
Yeah, we don't just... I love the idea that you walk in silence, set up 2 microphones and then go, hello and welcome.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But it's like a curtain that you come behind. You set up before I get here. It's like a weird arrangement. But I remarked earlier that I'm not play these games. I only hear great things about them. I'm 100% believe that they are as amazing as everyone says. Yeah. What I found interesting about this one was that I didn't hear much news about it. And I thought to myself, that must mean it's great. Because the expectations based on Breath of the Wild must have been high. So the only news that would have come about was if it was less than expected. And I didn't hear that, so I assumed it must have been great.
Oh, yeah. And it's as good as I expected it to be. And the new mechanics that they've added build on what was in Breath of the Wild beautifully. So much fun. It's an RPG that allows creativity. It's really, I think it'll be Game of the Year. I honestly think it's going to be Game of the Year.
It's one of those games that, and this is the most wanky, pretentious way you could talk about games. It's one of those games that make you go, you know what, video games can be art, you know?
Yeah, and I think what's incredible about it is I've seen articles written by developers who have been playing it and said, I don't know how Nintendo got Switch to do this.
Well,
so the physics in it is stunning. The physics, the game itself is really reliant on the physics, and the physics are really good, and they're kind of better than the Switch should be capable of, apparently. Because it's not a particularly powerful console, is it? It's a handheld console from 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not a new console, and it's not a particularly powerful console, and yet this really good game is running on it beautifully with really minimal bugs and issues.
It's funny you mentioned that because I saw a meme recently, which was it was a Simpsons clip, and it was dad hitting the back of his son's head.
Yeah,
and the dad was the new Zelda.
Yeah,
and the son was the latest Pokemon game. And the dad was going, see, that's how you make use of the Switch technology and make a good game.
Yeah, because I'm a big Pokemon fan, aren't I?
Yeah, I saw clips of that, and it looked horrible.
It's still super janky to the point that I am in a Nuzlocking subreddit and a shiny hunting subreddit for Pokemon, and most of the people I see shiny hunting are still doing it in either Sword and Shield or Legends Arceus. Like, people are not hitting Scarlet and Violet as hard as they hit Sword and Shield for the shiny hunting because it's just such a janky experience.
But the thing is, it's not even just bugs that could be repaired later, because unfortunately, the state of video games these days, that's most games that come out. It's not even that. It's the core thing is just bad. It's just not good. And I saw a view from one part, and it compared the landscape view, to Breath of the Wild, which was like almost 10 years ago.
Breath of the Wild's a fucking Wii U game, not even a Switch game.
And the comparison one looked like beautiful artwork, and the other one was like, could you only make the landscape with squares? And I don't mean pixels, I mean like cube blocks.
And the thing with Pokemon is they introduced a gliding mechanic and a climbing mechanic and a delineated open world. All of the things that make Breath of the Wild wonderful, they just did a really bad job of implementing it all. And I remember playing it thinking, what I want is Breath of the Wild, where instead of swinging a sword, I send out a Pokemon and control it. That's what I want from a Pokemon game.
I think that's a very common desire amongst the fan base from what I hear.
Yeah, no, I don't want a Pokemon game that plays like a Pokemon game from the 90s. What I want as a Pokemon fan now is an incredible open world RPG with lots of exploration, really, really like not linear story. And yeah, we're just not, I don't think we're ever going to get it. But I'm satisfying myself with Tears of the Kingdom because it is, honestly, it's worth you getting a Switch for. It's worth you getting a Switch for, right?
If I suddenly have a bunch of free time, it'll be on my like 10th list of things that I need to wait for free time to do.
100% wouldn't recommend playing it on the Switch Lite, the purely handheld one.
Yeah.
100%. I've only been playing it docked.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I've only been because it's too pretty. It's too pretty and it's too detailed. Like it doesn't. I mean, it plays just fine handheld, but I don't. I played about half an hour handheld and instantly went out of bed, back to my living room to dock it so I could play it on the TV again because it's just so good.
Fair enough.
But that's enough about, because if I talk about Tears of the Kingdom, I'm going to stop this podcast and just start playing it again.
That I will physically try and restrain you from doing that. One more thing before we get into the main course is we do have a brief mention of a podcast app or website or whatever you might call it.
This is really cool.
We've I don't know what the aggregator maybe, I don't know, but basically a podcast app called Pocket Casts has added us very kindly to a list of podcasts under the title Geek Speak. I don't know why they thought that would apply to us, geeks.
Yeah, I know, right? We're nerds, obviously.
Yeah, get it right. But
what's funny, Ryan, is that we're on that list for 3 weeks, and this podcast is going to come out in 4 weeks' time. So we will be off the list for the time they hear this.
Well, put it this way. By that point, to all the people who have found us through the list, thank you and welcome aboard.
And also a big thank you to Pocket Casts.
Exactly.
Because it's the first time something like this has happened to us, and it's really exciting and it's really flattering.
And one thing I will say as well is this is 100% true. I've shown you this on my phone. Pocket Cast is my podcast listening app. It is the one I use. The best one I've used. We're not being paid at all to advertise them. I'm just saying it was lucky that the one I used was the one that was like, hey, we're going to put you on the list. I was like, great, I use you already. So if you are someone who has found us through one of the other apps, give Pocket Casts a go.
Yeah.
It's been great for me, and it'll probably be great for you as well.
I'm going to try it. I don't use it, so I'll give it a try, and I'll report back next week.
And instantly, just looking at some of the other podcasts on the list, they look pretty good. We've got What's Good Games, Digital Folklore, which sounds very interesting.
Dungeons and Dragons one that I thought looked quite good.
Yep, Dumbs and Dragons, which looks very good. And there's also a Dr. DC podcast.
Yeah, we're an esteemed company, aren't we?
And speaking of DC...
Fuck DC.
That brings us swiftly back to the main course, which is a title that, well, it's a bit of a tie-in. There's a film coming out, the new Flash film.
Don't tell them how shameless we are.
Look,
don't do it.
It's the game, baby. We play the game to win.
I want my credibility back. You've taken it from me.
Don't hate the player. Don't hate the game either, because we need it. We need it for traffic and SEO. But basically, there's a big film coming out, Flashpoint. I thought, what better time than to go back and retro review in a way the 2011 title Flashpoint, which was the Flash crossover comic that basically kind of retconned in canon the DC universe so it's a big pivotal point of the DC Comics universe. And this is also kind of why we did last week 8 Billion Genies, because I thought
you have to give Jamie something interesting.
I was like, let's give Jamie a good one, but before we do one that might not be up his alley might not be his cup of tea, some might say.
I know which alley I'd like to take it up.
The one where Batman's parents died?
Yeah, fucking A. Just to hope I can get rid of Bruce as well.
Ooh. Well,
Oh, little Bruce as well. Jesus Christ, I really didn't like this comic.
So, getting into it already, the quality indicator. You missed it last week.
Fuck's sake.
So this week is going to be Jamie's recommending the story without spoiling it section.
Do you like it? You're going to have to leave all this dead space in.
Do I?
This is important. I think this is the best indicator of the way I'm feeling right now about the job in hand.
Can I just put some background music while you're like... Or if you know Community, it's...
It's gonna be one of those weeks, isn't it? So,
I'm a human. Tell me about the comic without spoiling it.
If you like it when a celebrity guest cameos in a laugh track studio comedy sitcom, you will like this comic book. That's
such an out of left field description of this comic.
Yeah,
I have no idea what you mean by that.
Well, you know, if you enjoy it when every problem, every piece of challenge in a piece of fiction is conveniently solved with the introduction of a new character, you'll like this comic book. If you like it when there is a fractured timeline for no reason, you'll probably like this comic. If you wonder what Bruce Wayne's dad was actually like, you'll love this comic. Is that enough?
Yeah, it's good enough. We also...
Are you going to do the blurb, aren't you?
I'll do a little bit of the blurb.
It wasn't ample. Ryan is not impressed.
To be honest, but then the blurb, the way the story is kind of laid out, the blurb also doesn't give much away either, which...
Did I do a better job, Ryan? Is that what you're telling me?
I think you did a different job, put it that way. I think it's such a well-known comic. Like, if you're a DC fan at all, you already know everything that happens in this story. So I will say up top, we are going straight in spoiler-free. It's a comic from 2011. If you do have an inkling of wanting to read it beforehand, it's 5 issues. I read the trade paperback, so I was a show. I think it was about 5 issues, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 5 issues. So it's worth a read if you are into superheroes, because it's interesting as a Flashpoint, if you will. Your face. If you'll allow me to use that verbiage to describe what I'm about to say.
Because you said verbiage, I'll let it slide.
I mean, I did say verbiage, so I don't know if that's technically correct, but...
More correct than this fucking comic book.
All right. It is kind of a flashpoint of the DC comics.
Sake.
Yeah, I'm using it. I worked it in. I'm using it.
No, you did a really good job of working it in.
And it's a flashpoint of the point where DC Comics retcon itself within canon, which is a very DC thing. It's very different to Marvel. Marvel tends to...
They just go for a soft reset, don't they?
Yeah, and they've done it in canon sometimes, but DC seem to do it in canon almost every time, where it's a big crisis of infinite worlds, crisis on infinite Earths, or whatever.
Crisis on Infinite Earths.
And that's always like, the worlds are collapsing in on each other. And then Marvel kind of nicked that a bit later for what they call the incursions.
Yeah.
So DC normally do it, and this is an interesting one because it's a singular title, in a way they did it, rather than a big crossover kind of thing. But it's still, again, as a superhero fan, it's interesting, probably because I knew a lot more of the references and other characters being mentioned and things like that. But that's also why it's so good to get your perspective as someone who does know those references. So the ultimate like judgment I'm looking for you is, does it stand on its own if you're not into superheroes, and does the story hold up without the assumed knowledge, should we say? And your answer is, I think, a no, right?
Yeah, no. I no more wanted to make sense of it than I was able to.
So you weren't even concerned that you didn't know the references.
No.
But not in a good way.
Yeah, because...
Not in like, I'm having so much fun. I don't even care if I know who Hal Jordan is.
Yeah, no, like, I was able to work out who the Shazam kids were. But one of them had a tiger, Ryan?
To be fair, I didn't anticipate the tiger.
Is that canon? Why does one of the Shazam kids have a pet tiger?
I don't know the reference myself, so I don't know if it is an existing one or not. I'm not as knowledgeable on Shazam. Okay. And to be fair, this title, there were a bunch of characters I'd never heard of. And that's coming from me.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No, exactly. So, but then also the ones I did know, I thought, well, James not going to know those either. So you're going to have even less common knowledge.
Yeah, mate. I recognised... Well, there was 2 characters who I did recognise, and they were meant to be at war with them, and you never see them. Like, there is a war going on between Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and every other DC hero, and the only 2 people you never see are Wonder Woman and Aquaman. You see Aquaman's trident in a panel at some point, and it's like, why? Why did they pick Wonder Woman and Aquaman to lead this weird rebellion where they drowned England? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I think the reason they were chosen was because they are representatives of societies or civilizations. So
right,
they could,
okay.
It was
the Amazons and the water people?
The Atlanteans.
The Atlanteans, the
Atlantis.
water people.
That's such a derogatory term, Jamie. I can't believe you'd steep to that level to refer to the proud Atlantean civilization in that way.
The fish people.
That's even worse. That's a harmful stereotype, and we're going to get cancelled if you keep referring to them that way. Yeah,
no, Pocket Castle, strike us off.
Rightfully so. They only make good decisions, as we've established.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I will say this comic lost me right from the start. Because what is my least favourite thing, Ryan?
Is it the origin being at the beginning of a story again?
No, even I like it even less than that. Exposition.
Oh,
and what do we open with?
Riddled with exposition.
We open with Batman Senior with his little fucking yellow speech bubbles overimposed over the rest of it, saying, "Oh, well, this isn't my story, but it's the best man I ever met." And I'm like, oh, why have you done this? I can't believe you've done this.
But the Flash brought back hope to Thomas Wayne.
He brought something. And what he brought was death and destruction to the people of Earth, apparently.
I did think that it was interesting that the origin at the beginning was a bit quicker than usual, than other titles that kind of begin with a superhero. Normally it's Batman in the alley, young Bruce Wayne in the alley with the parents, the pearl necklace gets like ripped and the pearls fall, and normally it's that in-depth, like every beginning of a Batman comic. Whereas
do they do it every time?
Not literally every time, but enough times that it's a noticeable trope. Like they've done it so many in the films, like so you quantify that with like how many new comics get released, and every once in a while they'll do that again. And there's always some writer has to be like, I need to do my version of it, and it's a big reason why we never saw the origin of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, because by that point Kevin Feige, the main guy of MCU, he's quite clued in with all this stuff.
He made
a
great choice.
Yeah, he was like, we don't need to show that again. We've seen it twice in live action already. Let's just skip past it. It's fine.
I don't want to watch Peter Parker's uncle die again.
Exactly. But one of my criticism, I think my biggest criticism of this, and it might be a bit different to yours, I thought it was paced way too fast. I think they tried to put too much in a short time or short amount of issues, and nothing got time to really,
I think that's what
explore.
I'd going for it.
But it was quick. But you're like, that's like if you watch a bad film, it's like, 90 minutes. Like, I'll watch a bad anything in for 9 minutes. Yeah. Like 3 hours. Oh.
No, I agree with you. The story skipped along. Yeah, it did, didn't it? It kind of jumped along to the extent that in issue 4, at the end of issue 4, they'd just kind of freed Superman, who isn't Superman. He's some poor emaciated child man. And then at the very start of issue 5, Flash is on his knees, and the anti-Flash, who should be really slow,
Reverse Flash.
Yeah, so the Flash is opposite, right?
Yeah.
Isn't really slow. he's really fast in reverse.
Yeah.
And Tom Wayne was like asking Barry Allen for an explanation about this, and he went, well, it's simple science. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, Barry. That's not science. That's bollocks.
Were you not able to suspend your disbelief for reverse speed force? Is that what you're saying?
Well, isn't there a Flash story where he runs really fast, making the Earth spin faster to go forward in time?
No, I think you're thinking of the Superman, one of the original Superman films,
right,
where Lois Lane got killed somehow, so Superman flew around the Earth to make it go back. So he flew the opposite way of the rotation, and he made it go back in time, and then saved the day, which is very much scientific bollocks.
Yeah, because if he did that, the Earth would just spin off its axis and disappear into the sun.
Yeah.
Which, at this point...
It's Lois is gone. It's like either it's going to go back in time or everyone's going to die, and I'm happy with either.
Yeah,
or.
Absolutely. And then he can just fly back to Krypton and hang out with the space Nazis.
Krypton blew up.
Oh, it did, didn't it? It did, yeah. It did.
You're thinking of Alan Moore's very specific interpretation of what could have happened.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
What if Krypton never blew up? Well, I guess everyone would be Nazis. What, Alan?
Fucking Alan Moore, man. What a dude. I really want to pick his brains as to what he was thinking when that happened.
About the one topic that he never wants to discuss again, which is anything superhero related.
Yeah, but I think you and I, right, are enthusiastic enough fans of him. And if the past, how many episodes have we released now? We're pretty deep into this project, aren't we?
I mean, by the time this one comes out, I'd say 2021.
Yeah. If the, an hour and a half a time, so 21, if the 30 hours of content we've put out into the ether tells Alan Moore anything, it's that we think he's a bloody legend.
I think what the takeaway that he would take away from all our content is, these are two man babies who read comics, and that's lame. I think
that's Ryan.
Are you saying you're not reading the comics?
Well, yeah, but I'm reading them because I said yes to being in a podcast with you, and occasionally I have to read superhero comics to facilitate those conversations.
That's all gravy to Alan.
Do you think? Do you think Alan wouldn't care? He wouldn't see the nuance.
If you look at a superhero comic, you're dead to me. I think that's the attitude he's rocking around. Fair dues to him. Fair dues to him.
But no, so I my takeaways from this is that there was a lot of exposition up front.
Yeah.
A lot of the story beats were quite expositional. It was, and then this thing kept happening where Batman Senior and
Mr. Batman. Yeah.
And then Flash No Powers Mr. Flash.
Yep.
Would get themselves into a pickle, and you'd go
Mr. Allen. And then I thought Barry Allen Moore.
More. I don't want more Barry Allen. That's the one thing I don't want.
Barry Allen Moore, as in more Barry Allen. Go on.
Barry Allen, Moore.
Yeah.
And then Moore is the first name, and that's just how you've organised it on the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Spreadsheet jokes, anybody? No. So my takeaway from the story is that Batman Senior and Barry would get themselves into a pickle, like when they try to free Superman, and Superman just fucks off.
Yeah.
And then they don't know what they're going to do, and then Deus Ex Machina just kind of floats in from the sky and says, "Hi, I'm this superhero, and I'm here to solve this specific problem." And then they solve the problem, and they kind of skip into the next problem.
Which, for me, I didn't notice that pattern, but because what I was looking at was, why isn't Flash just sorting it out? And this is unfortunately, I don't read Flash comics generally. I know a fair bit about the character, but I don't read his. And a lot of the problem for me is either he is fighting another speedster who is a little bit faster than him, so that's becomes a challenge, or it's a non-speedster, and the question becomes, why hasn't the Flash just completely run through him already? The only occasionally there's an interesting one, maybe it's a mind control or something like that, where it's not about how physically fast you can move.
Yeah.
But a lot of them it is about how physically fast you can move, and he's not just immediately solved the crime or wrangled everyone up immediately.
I feel like the Flash is it provides you with the same level of entertainment first Sonic the Hedgehog game does, which is like, we have a problem.
Gotta run fast.
Gotta go fast.
Yeah.
We have a problem. What do we need to solve this problem? Oh, we just need to run really fast.
And if anyone has watched the Flash TV show, which was very hit and miss, more misses than hits as it went on.
Yeah.
Because it was made by the CW, which is just an awful... They make shit television, unfortunately, which I watched a fair bit because some of it was superhero-based.
The
running... Thanks, More. The running thing there was like... Flash, like, what are we gonna do? I can't beat this guy. And one of his team, like people behind in the chair on the comms, being like, "Have you considered running faster?" And he goes, "Oh, that did it."
Did
and
they actually?
It legit in a roundabout way, yeah.
For fuck's sake!
But so this is the reason that I don't read a lot of the Flash is because of that. Like, why doesn't the super speed just sort everything out? And I think it's hard to write speedsters in general, unless because like super strength, it's a bit more kind of like, it's easy to perceive because it just happens in real time. Whereas super speed, it's like, well, how fast are we talking? And like, great example, if anyone's seen the X-Men films with Quicksilver, and his is just, he's basically slowed down time. So that's an extreme one end. So no one should be able to even touch him, because he has that power. But then you get the other end where it's speedsters who can run really fast, but you can like trip them up because they're running so fast they're not able to react as quickly.
Yeah.
And then that's the bottom end. So then you've got to find like, well, which are they? Because the problem is, in a running story, sometimes they'll be the low end, sometimes they'll be the high end. Yeah. And that becomes the inconsistency, which doesn't work. Like, where super strength, you don't constantly question, like, well, how many metric tons can they actually lift? Like, you're not really...
It's like you don't
find yourself asking yourself. Well, I don't anyway. People might be different. Maybe some people have different views on
No, I
on
can
that.
appreciate that.
There's one I do particularly like. One of his enemies, Captain Cold, who...
Captain Cold.
Who is in this.
Is he just a bit chilly?
Well, he wears like a big parka. And like,
I saw him. Yeah.
So the thing about this timeline was he became the hero instead of Flash of that city. But the reason is because I do like this. Him and some other villains are part of what they're called the Rogues.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about them is they'll rob banks and stuff, but they are explicitly a no-kill like villains. Like, they will not injure or kill people. They're like, we'll steal stuff and we'll threaten people, but we ain't killing people.
Like the loan sharks.
Yeah. Like, we don't use guns. So
that's a deep cut from a previous episode.
Yes.
For anyone who doesn't know what I'm on about.
Deep lore, comic literate lore.
Yeah.
But then what's good about Captain Cold specifically is the reason that he is a formidable foe to a speedster is what he does is he's got basically an ice gun, kind of like Mr. Freeze. But he shoots the floor, and the Flash immediately loses friction and can't do the super speed.
So he just runs on the spot.
He might, or just he'll more likely just go into a wall or something, because he's going to completely lose his control, but he's built up the velocity, or whatever the scientific term is, so he's just like, whoa, and then, So that's like the most formidable against a speedster. It's like, oh, it's a dude with an ice gun.
It's a slightly cold day. It's every day in Norway.
I mean, the Flash wouldn't do well in Iceland for sure.
No, any Scandi country, he'd be fucked.
As soon as it gets out of like the summer months, he's like, well, I can't be a superhero anymore.
He hangs up his super suit.
Yeah.
And then when the summer comes, he calls out to his wife and he's like, "Where is my super suit?"
Yes, exactly. Just like the reference. Who was also an ice making guy.
He could fuck the Flash up.
He could. A lot of the ice ones do, for exactly that reason. There's a bit of logic.
Yeah, I mean,
barely.
So I am a big fan of fantasy and science fiction, but I like my fantastical world to at least be, contained by some kind of logical consistency. And my problem here is that everything that they needed to happen, it was just like, if you just like strike me with some lightning, I'll turn back into the Flash. Like, well,
actually, he needed to be covered in the exact same chemicals that he was covered in his original accident, and it was the mixture of the chemicals and the lightning, I think you'll find, that made him Flash. Also, technically, when he was originally struck, The lightning bolt that struck him later turned out to be a future version of himself. So he was giving himself the Speed Force going back in time in a paradox way. So it was always meant to happen.
Dumb.
It's simple science, Jamie. I don't know what you're complaining about. Simple science.
Ryan, we were in the same secondary school's triple science class, and at no point did they say, you need to cover yourself with chemicals, get struck by lightning, which is actually yourself from the future, and then you'll be really big fast.
But it's a risk, though, because it didn't work the first time. So that's why they didn't tell you to do it. It's like you could end up with like 3rd-degree burns on most of your body. Don't want to risk that.
Yeah.
And you might not want to try again. You might not have the motivation of a recently resurrected mother who you're trying to save the world from, but also keep her alive or something.
Yeah, like something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
His motivations were never fully clear.
I mean, trying to get the world back to normal, I guess, was the motivation, wasn't it?
Yeah, but
I do think that they did lean heavy on the trope of, and I don't know if this was the case back in 2011, if this was a recognized trope back then or not, but the timeline has changed. I think we've had a fair bit of that in like the 10 plus years since.
Honestly, it feels like every Marvel or DC comic I open, there is an element of the timeline's broken, we need to fix it. They're all very Back to the Future as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and this one is one of the most well-known ones. I don't want to say one of the best ones, obviously, but one of the most
Not
well-known.
in front of me.
No.
Only in private.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't rate the actual comic and the story very highly. But I like, for me, seeing Thomas Wayne being more, not bad Batman, but like being a more violent Batman. For me, that's like, bloody hell, we've never seen this character before. Like, I get that from it. Or I get like, one I made a note of, so bad Thomas Wayne Batman was brought back later on in the fold because he was a popular version of the character. People like, bring Thomas Wayne Batman back, and they did.
Right.
They never, to my knowledge, did another scrawny, weak, malnourished Superman. So something like that visual is quite striking, and as far as I know, it's only ever been done in this. So things like that, when you're used to certain versions and representations of the character for so long, and then you see this one, that's what makes it interesting, at least, even if the story isn't up to par. They
also did my favorite, the only DC character that I rate, really dirty in this. Because when they go to Superman's
prison,
lab, yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah,
there's a canine skeleton, which implies that Supergirl and Superdog did not make it.
Superman? No, Supergirl was a separate pod.
There was a second pod.
Yeah.
And then there's a table, and Barry Allen, walks past and says, oh, that looks like a canine skeleton. And I'm like, Crypto.
He's dead.
Crypto didn't make it in this. And I like Crypto because we did that Supergirl comic, and that was pretty good. And Crypto was like pretty fucking cool. We like Crypto.
He definitely didn't go to live on a farm on Krypton.
Oh, like that. Honestly, that is the only bit of the comic book that affected me. There were many what the fuck moments.
Yeah.
Can I list some what the fuck moments?
Sure.
So we're jumping all the way to the end of the comic book now, right?
Right.
Final panel. They're back in Barry Allen's
Batman's cave.
Yeah, they're in the Batcave in Barry Allen's original timeline,
which later we found out turned out to be the New 52 version. But we'll
so we've got Batman Jr.
Yeah,
we've got Batman Jr. No, Batman was my father.
Yes,
and they're in the Batcave. And there's just a fucking T-Rex in that last panel.
That's very canon.
They've had this big, like, quasi-emotional conversation where, like, the Flash says, where Batman basically says that, the reward is the fucking memories we made along the way.
Yeah.
And he gives
the real treasure. The real journey was the treasure we made in the Friends.
Yeah. Like, you've got these fucking phantom memories of your, like, dead mum that... he was, that's just a gift. And then he gives him a letter from Batman Senior.
Yeah.
And then there's a T-Rex. Like, what the fuck is that doing there?
The T-Rex is a staple of the Batcave for decades.
No.
Yeah.
What?
Always, yeah.
Why? What? Why? So, right?
Is your question why?
Batman has a T-Rex.
T-Rex, like a fake stuffed T-Rex. It's not a real T-Rex.
Oh, well, that's shit.
Yeah, it's so he's got things in his cave which have been continued for decades that are from past big crimes or events.
So he has a fake taxidermy T-Rex.
And a giant penny. You think I'm making that up? That's been there for ages.
1 minute.
I don't know if they put it in this one, but the giant penny is a staple also of the Batcave.
I'm googling it.
Yeah?
I believe you.
And
giant penny Batman.
And what's interesting is different writers.
Does he have a giant penny?
Well, so different writers will make their own backstories for why he has them. So it becomes a bit of a fun thing between writers where like that you always, if you're a Batman writer, you will eventually draw the cave or, write the cave.
Because there's the big Joker poster. There's the T-Rex.
The poster, I think, is a card. Like a giant playing card.
And then there's it's even got Abe on it.
Yeah.
What?
There's a giant penny.
Okay, so maybe that's just okay, so that's not a big what the fuck moment.
I mean, it can, if you don't know, then yeah, it is, but...
There is also another what the fuck moment that I had.
Sure.
There is a moment when the Flash says, the only way... The only way I can go back in time is if I have a cosmic treadmill. And then he's just there on a treadmill that has a label on the side that says cosmic treadmill.
Yeah, that's how you know it's the cosmic treadmill. Would you not label your cosmic treadmill from your normal treadmill?
Well,
what if you got on the wrong one and then you accidentally went back in time in your gym gear? Like, oh, for God's sake.
But what the... is that like a historic thing from old
that's
comics?
canon. Yeah, that's canon. That's how it focuses his speed force or something, and then he go back in time.
And comic book fans wonder why Alan Moore thinks they're man babies.
I mean, I don't wonder. I know very well. I know full well.
I'm really sorry. I'm really struggling.
No, but this is like, as a comic book fan, this is all ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think if you are listening right now and you are an ardent superhero fan like myself, these are the eye-opening things, like the realizations, the perspectives that we don't have.
Yeah.
So for me, the T-Rex and the giant penny, I don't even register now because they've just always been in Batman's cave. So I've never questioned.
Yeah.
And it's only when you ask me, what's with the giant T-Rex? And I go, oh yeah, that is weird. Because it's just always been around.
Yeah.
And I think that's great for, like, if you're in any kind of fandom, the outside new view, it's important because it's the difference between like people getting into it or being like overly confused.
Yeah.
And we always use the term like impenetrable banter. It's
Yeah.
like we're making inside jokes and no one knows why it's funny, but we're laughing. It's the same with any kind of ongoing franchise or literature or whatever. If there's too much that's confusing, entry points for new people is what makes like things like franchises like these thrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, this is why I always come back to wanting you to come into these with as little relevant knowledge as possible.
Yeah.
Because we want to know if it's good or not. And like by contrast, and I think this is going to come up a lot, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, you didn't need any of it to enjoy it. You had questions, but you didn't. You weren't like, I couldn't get into it because I didn't know who the Kryptons were or who Crypto is, or
And I think what's really interesting is that I now have a bit of a critical understanding of that part of the DC universe. So the kind of Kryptonian family of heroes and that kind of, that whole set of canon, if you will, I now have a bit of an understanding about it because I read and enjoyed a Supergirl comic.
Yeah.
This was impenetrable to me.
Yes, exactly.
And there wasn't a lot of depth to any of the characters. They were all really one note. Even Barry Allen was a bit one note.
Yeah, and I think he definitely had a simplified goal and reason for doing everything. And that spoke to me of being just too quick and fast a story.
Yeah.
One of my notes was going literally, once you get a brief explanation of who the Flash is, we're straight away into the new timeline. So for someone who doesn't know, like him getting up and running and not being fast, anyone can infer, well, he's the Flash, but he's not fast, so that's the problem. But when you get things like, where's my ring? And I know the ring, you don't know the ring. When he's like, where's Iris West? And Iris Allen. So I was like, don't you mean Iris West? I know who that is. You don't.
Yeah.
So all those little things. At the same time, it was so quickly paced to not get into anything properly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there was so much Barry Allen had so much exposition. But and this was the trope I was going to mention earlier, the confused person in the new timeline trope.
Yeah.
Where he's like, but we're married, don't you remember? It's like, this is an alternate timeline already. You've worked that out because your mum's alive.
Yeah.
You know this, and you're still doing the, like, when he meets Batman, Bruce, don't you remember me? Even if it was Bruce, you're a scientist. You know what's going on. I know it can
Barry Allen a scientist?
Yeah, he's a forensic scientist. So he's like a crime scene
the cold cases that he's been
investigator.
staying up all night doing.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And again, that was irrelevant knowledge. Like, that didn't really matter as much, I don't think. But yeah, so that like dumb character who's dumb because they're trying to put in the emotional beats. But with better writing, I think you could have those emotional beats where you have him just looking, it's like he goes to visit Iris West and he's like, are we still married in this? And then he sees her and he's looking for Iris Allen because they're married and it's Iris West. And he goes, okay, so we're not married. Maybe she knows me at least. And at least he could have gone up to her and be like, hi. And she goes, hi, can I help you? And he's like, right, I know. So he goes, sorry, I thought you were someone else. Like and then it could have been like an emotional, like, ooh, I feel that she doesn't know me and that hurts. Like, but instead he's doing don't you remember me? Like,
yeah, there's so many points where and you're so right. The idea of somebody stepping into a life they think is theirs and realizing it isn't anymore because they're in an alternate universe. There's so many points where you can show me things about that character. Yeah. And as you say, you literally, when you impersonated him, just started flapping your arms about, and that's exactly what Barry's doing in the first 4 pages of this book.
Imagine
he's just flapping around town going, where's my mum alive? No one recognizes me.
When you pointed out that I was doing the other thing, it made me think of, imagine like alternate timeline story, but in the Muppets universe. So it's Kermit going up to Miss Piggy like, Miss Piggy, don't you remember me?
We should get onto Disney directly.
No, that's Jim Henson. Oh, I don't know if are they owned
Disney
by
now?
Oh, God,
the Muppets are owned by Disney, mate.
Lady, like everything, will be owned by Disney soon.
Yeah.
Get that big cash payday.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate, isn't it?
And then every time we do a Marvel one, like, this one was surprisingly good. Like, you say that for every Marvel one. Like, we have to now.
Yeah, Disney owns us. We got bought. We made it onto one list on a podcasting app, and then Disney bought us.
Yeah. So naturally, my notes are chronological because, as we know by now, that's how I roll when I'm making notes.
Yeah.
Why? A lot of mine are just little things, which again, like we've talked about the kind of grander issues.
Not done.
Oh, it's just, you've got more. Okay.
Go. Let me get
I'll
jump in.
Good to interesting, and we'll kind of flip back and forth. One thing I did like, one panel, which I thought was just a good little art effect, was the reverse Flash ghost. I thought that was a little, the space behind Barry's mum, and there's a space where it's like just the yellow faint outline of his head that's just gone past. So I thought that was a little one. And while we're on as well, the art, I think the art was, I don't want to say passable because that sounds like bad.
Really cruel,
but it was to spec, like it was to request. They needed someone to just like do the superhero art style so we can tell the story.
This is the thing with these big superhero comics, Matt. The art is often just
like a factory line, like produced kind of thing.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I think that's probably how this stuff is produced.
Yeah, and like prime example, I think this is going to be an example I was going to come back to. 8 Billion Genies, beautiful art. We first encountered that artist on Meet the Skrulls, which I would have described as passable as well. So we know these artists are capable of much better things. But at the end of the day, they are taking a job to do the job that they're hired to do.
I don't even know if the same artist does all of the art on these comics. I would imagine.
I think for a title they do, yeah.
Well, but I would imagine one person would do the sketches and the inks, and then there'd be a separate colorist, and there'd be a whole team of people who just colored the shit in.
So this one did have different penciler and colorists. So yeah, there was a bit of a
100%. It's a fucking production line, isn't it? There's
Yes.
one person doing the sketching and the inking. There's one person coloring it, and so you're not seeing, like, not as human beings, we do our best work when we collaborate. But I think when you're talking about a piece of art,
unless you're Alan Moore,
for Alan Moore, and then you just need to be alone
in a cabin in the woods.
Yeah, even better, in a tower overlooking a medieval vista.
Yes, with an orb that he can see the story.
Yeah.
His mind is producing the story in the orb, and then he's translating it to paper.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something about, like, I mean, you know, you're sketching something and then somebody else gets it and they color it in and you're all doing it for a paycheck. And coolest job in the world, I'm sure. Like, drawing and coloring comic books must be the best fucking job.
Yeah.
You don't get into it unless you're into comic books. Like, you know, it must be incredible work to do, but it is, they're just smashing this shit out, aren't they?
I feel like the best way, something I would try and equate this to would be like the writers who have to do like articles on things that they're somewhat interested in, but it's a very formulaic version, whatever. And then on the side or elsewhere in their job, they're actually then writing interesting like blog pieces or like actual stories, fiction and non-fiction, whatever. But this is the paying the bills thing it's interesting because it's what they like doing, but it's the least interesting version of that. But to be fair as well, the artist could be a massive superhero fan. So they could literally just be doing like, fucking hell, I'm drawing Batman. Yeah. Like, and that's enough for them. And like, great, like fantastic if it is. But yeah, it's definitely noticeably like serviceable art with, again, some good points. I think there's some big spread superhero battles, which like, if you're a superhero fan, they're good for people like us.
The one thing that I will say, and I suppose this is probably commonality among the people that they get to sketch and ink the Flash, that whoever it is did their study well and did a very good image of people running.
Oh yeah, that's a common effect. Yeah,
he looked good when he was running, particularly when he was on his cosmic treadmill, and there was a particular panel of him at full tilt, and I was like, the anatomy there is particularly good.
Yes.
That is a very pretty, muscular man running very fast, and that's very obvious.
In skin-tight lycra, but it's not even lycra, it's a special material that can that can fit inside a ring.
Yeah, the ring. What's going on with the ring?
So the ring is literally, it holds his entire costume in. So his costume is made of material that can condense because it's so lightweight, and it has to be like protective against like the high speeds. And
so I imagine he'd have some really bad chafing if he did it in jeans.
Exactly. And no, the jeans burn up. That's, I think, is the thing. It's like before Origins, when he's first got his powers, he starts running without realizing what he's doing, and his clothes like start to burn up because his organic material is all part of the Speed Force, but he needs special clothes to be, you know, non Speed Force burning.
He's running proof trousers.
Yeah. And what is good as well is if it fits into the ring, and then the iconic him launching it out of the ring. So he presses a button and it shoots kind of out of the ring. So this material kind of shoots in the air, and then in super speed, he gets into the costume while it's in midair. So it never even hits the floor. So that's
because
like a cool
super
visual.
Speedy.
Yeah, of course. He's just getting changed into it like so quickly.
I mean, it's kind of fun when he opens the ring, right? It's not his costume that pops out of it. It's Anti-Flash.
Yes, and I do not know why.
Yeah, because and it made no sense to me. And I suppose it was a convenient way of well, this is the thing.
Of being like, I think I know who's behind this now.
Yeah, and again, it was another one of those crazy random happenstances that just kept happening in this book, where there was just an all too convenient reason for something to happen, or character who just turned up out of the blue that nobody was expecting that solved their problem. And it was another one of those, wasn't it? Also, the what's his name? The anti-Flash. I keep calling
Reverse
him-
Flash.
Is that actually his
Yeah,
name?
the Reverse Flash. Yeah.
Reverse Flash.
Dio's real name. His like birthday.
Dwayne.
Eobard Thorne. Eobard Thorne. He is from the future, so it's a future name. Eobard. E-O and then Bard. Eobard. Thorne. Not like O-N Thorne, like A-W. I mean, you saw it written. You know.
Yeah.
You know.
Why is this significant?
Because it's from the I just didn't know if you want to know his name because you kept calling him Reverse Flash. So you could call him Eobard, you could call him Thorne.
Thorne. We'll go for Thorne.
Sure.
I thought it was going to be Barry Allen backwards.
No.
And that's why I was like, there's no L's. Yeah, his character, his costume design.
It's just the reverse.
Well, yeah, and it reminded me of when you would play Street Fighter as a kid with your mate,
Yeah.
and you'd both want to be Ryu, and so one of you would have to be like weird blue Ryu with a green headband. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he was like player 2 Flash.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I know a bit about the Flash history. I'm not entirely sure. So I know Eobard's origin was he was in the future and he was obsessed with the Flash.
Yeah.
And then, because the Flash is like
they go into it in the book.
Yeah. And then he uses the Speed Force from before to create a reverse Speed Force and then becomes a reverse Flash. And then because he's obsessed with him, he tries to be the Flash in the present. And then that leads to him. The bit I'm missing is how he then hates the Flash. That's I don't know about. He's a villain. But yeah, I thought at least the one effect of him, they were somewhat restrained in not having him in it much until the end.
Yeah.
Whereas I like in a worse comic, I think he would have constantly been like, Flash, I'm here, but you won't get me. I'm going now. I'll see you at the end. Like that kind of no. So he was like, it was a good part of how he was hinted at as they went along and then appeared at the end. Thought that was good at least. I liked that Themyscira took over the UK and the UK became New Themyscira, because if you live in the UK right now, we would gladly have anyone else in charge.
Themyscira?
Amazons. Sorry, the Amazons.
Oh, yeah, I would much rather have Wonder Woman than Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there might be...
Is it still Rishi Sunak?
It is still Rishi Sunak.
I feel like it's been...
it might not be by the time this comes out. We can't predict the future.
I feel like it's been at least 45 days since we had a new Prime Minister. It's like we're due one.
Yeah, it's been a bit long. Things got a bit stale. Like, we need new scandals and new...
If you're from America, there was a guy who left a lettuce out of the fridge and it lasted longer than our last Prime Minister.
Yep.
She was like 43 days or something.
She speed ran being a Prime Minister. Turns out you can speed run it if you just make the absolute worst decisions in a short amount of time.
Do you know what's brilliant? Every single British Prime Minister gets a custom designed, custom made lectern for when they do addresses outside of number 10. Every single Prime Minister has had their own lectern, right? And they are like custom designed to project a certain thing. And there's always a bit of a, like if you go looking for it, there's like a bit of a story as to why they go with a certain shape or a certain design. Some poor team of carpenters and designers had to build a lectern specifically for her to make her speech as the new Prime Minister, make a speech announcing that the Queen had died, and then make a speech saying that she was stepping down. That lectern got used 3 times, none of them good.
I mean, the first one we didn't know how bad that was going to be until after the third one. The first one could have been a bit hopeful for some people.
It was crazy. Like, she became Prime Minister and then like 2 days later the fucking Queen popped it.
Yep. And because everyone made the jokes about like the Queen met Liz Truss and was like, oh, bollocks to this.
I'm fucking done with it.
Can't be asked to deal with that.
You can have Charles.
Yeah. He can deal with this. Speaking of things that are good, so bad it's good. I thought a line that I particularly liked. You had one as well, but I'll read mine first, which was, and this is, I'm not even going to give the context of this line. I just thought it was great. It was, my meta vest consents it. She's a bit mad. And all I will say is,
Cyborg, wasn't it?
No, that was someone else.
Okay.
But what I will say is, if you read the context of the scene, you would go, yeah, mate, we all knew she was mad. We knew from her talking that she was a bit mad.
So they are they're in the labyrinthine underbelly of Superman's prison.
Yeah.
And Cyborg turns to the Flash and Batman Senior, says, "With you on board, everyone else will be too. We can save the world from war, and I'll finally make my dad proud."
So, what's worse about that?
So bad.
Not only is the
So
line
bad.
not only is the line itself really bad, clunky exposition,
Yeah.
but also for anyone who hasn't read the comic, Cyborg's dad is not mentioned any other time.
No, it's the only time.
Only mentioned. And to be fair, if you know the Cyborg character from before, then you know he has a bit of a relationship with his dad. But if you're going to mention it in this comic in such a line, you probably should show that he has a strained relationship somewhere else, but preferably before this line.
There was one more that I've screenshotted clearly for a reason. Oh yeah, no, it was the yeah. We've already talked about it. So I have 3 screenshots that I took of this comic book.
Right.
One of them was, "Daddy, why don't you love me?"
Yeah.
The other one was the cosmic
treadmill.
And the last one was the T-Rex. The casual T-Rex.
Yeah. The one that superhero fans are blind to now.
Yeah, and you know what? I love an Easter egg. And so I can kind of get behind the Batman's, like the Batcave stuff.
Yeah. There's trophies, essentially.
Yeah. So, you said there's a different reason.
Yeah, it's always changing, yeah. There's a great one from the Batman animated series, which I think is where I first saw them and just got ingrained into me without then questioning it later. The Penny had a great one. So it was Two-Face, who loves his coins and everything. He tied Batman to the penny and had the penny on a thing like a catapult, and it was going to be launched through the air. And Batman, but what was clever was it would spin the penny, so it'd be heads or tails, and whichever one it was would kill Batman. So his life was literally in a heads or tails, thing. And unfortunately for Two-Face, Batman had like a batarang hidden in his glove, and he got out and he cut himself free, and and he never got to saw it land. And I think Two-Face was like, "Let me just see which shit would have come up." And Batman was like, "No, you're going to prison, Harvey."
So the irony there, of course, being that if you strapped a person to a giant coin,
it would affect the weight.
And it would, and so it would just fall directly down, and Batman would have been crushed.
But do we know that would still apply to a giant we assume metal penny? Like, do we know if that's enough weight to affect it?
It depends on whether or not the penny is made out of copper, as they traditionally were, or it's zinc with a copper core, as they are now.
But a giant one could be anything, because it doesn't have the same requirements.
Zinc with a copper core. I would imagine that making a giant penny out of copper now would be prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, of course.
Because of the cost of copper.
But this was back in like late 90s, so I don't know what...
Copper was just getting more expensive.
Yeah, but only just. And Harvey, he was robbing banks. So
he had a lot of copper.
His goons were probably like, what are you doing with your share, boss? And he was like, "I'm making a giant penny." And they were like, "Ha, good one." He's like, "What are you laughing at?"
I wonder what the year is on the giant penny.
What, when it first introduced?
Well, when the penny first introduced?
No, the giant penny, do you mean?
Yeah, do you reckon they mint it with the year they made it? Or do they mint it as a replica of a historic penny?
Well, the pennies have always, as far as I know, had Abe Lincoln on, so technically you could give it any year, but then maybe it's like a rare one, the special commemorative.
The penny,
something.
yeah.
The first penny or something.
The American 1-cent coin has consistently had Abe Lincoln on it.
Yeah. Another bit that I liked was...
Is this penny talk over?
I mean, we've got a penny's worth
We've
out
exhausted.
Well, I say we're not in for a penny and for a pound on this one.
Penny for your thoughts.
Giant penny. That's what I'm thinking about now. And speaking of my thoughts, when I saw the Shazam kids were like multiple kids. So normally Shazam is one kid who has that power.
Not in the new film.
So the new one, they've all got separate powers. But they are all the same powers, which Shazam has given to his adopted siblings.
Oh, so it's not like Power Rangers style. I assumed this was a Power Rangers dealio.
No, so normally Shazam is the one character, but then in iterations, I think, especially more recently, he gives powers to his siblings so they can all fight alongside each other. But Shazam has all the powers. I think he gives like separate. So Shazam works where it's like the strength of some god and like the wisdom of another one. I can't remember which god's which, but he has the attributes of gods. So with the siblings, he gives them each an attribute, but he still has all of them himself. But in this one, they all combine into the one superhero. And to me, that was the superhero equivalent of kids stacked in a trench coat. Hello, I'm Thunderman.
Thunderman as
Wait a
well?
minute, you're just 5 kids in a superhero.
You're just 5 kids in a super suit.
They're like trying to get into the Justice League meeting, and
they get carded on the way into the Justice League.
as you'll see, I am one man and not 5 children. That was oddly specific, but okay.
I didn't think of it that way. What happens to the tiger?
I have no idea.
Does it just run feral?
I assume so. I mean, if you have a magic tiger, like you probably got to get something out of it like that.
Again, I was hoping you'd be able to give me more.
That was,
information.
I said that's what I just told you is pretty much my limit of Shazam knowledge.
If you're like, because obviously these episodes are not for the die-hard comic book nerds, because you know more than 50% of the people who are producing this podcast.
Yeah, but then I think as well, we like I said before, we should still have a value to them for
I
this
hope
other.
so.
Yeah. Unless you're one of those nerds who's just screaming like, how does he not know about the tiger? Like, if you're one of those, then
well, if you
this
are,
ain't for you.
Can you write in?
Yeah, correct us.
Because honestly, I can't be bothered to Google it, because I'm going to, at the moment that Ryan leaves, I'm going to go back to playing Zelda, but I would like to know about the tiger.
Yeah, I would also like to hear about the tiger as well. The Flash stuck in traffic, I enjoyed. just a lovely little he's not used to this, is he? Now he's like us schmucks who go work and everything.
No, I didn't clock it, but now that you mention it, yeah, that's quite funny.
One thing I did think was a good use of art for story was the reveal of the sunken Eiffel Tower. I thought that was a good scene.
It's the only time that they showed us something without also telling us about it.
It was the one bit of show, don't tell.
Yeah, no. So well done.
And then one of them went, bloody hell, it's the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, no, they did. They absolutely fucking did, didn't they?
They might not have, to be fair.
No, they did. Oh. They did. Like, that genuinely happened. I'm going to find it. What issue was it in?
2 or 3, I think.
Yeah, no, they did. Yeah, they did.
Bloody hell, it's the Eiffel Tower that's underwater because the Atlanteans flooded the France.
The hilarious thing is that this was very like America-centric.
Yeah.
America,
fuck yeah. Here to save the motherfucking day, yeah.
So I imagine that because this was made for a predominantly American audience, they had to signpost the Eiffel Tower, because if not, they'd be like, isn't that thing in Vegas?
Bloody hell, Vegas is underwater now. So, oh, thank God, it's just France. People in that world are like, oh, thank God, it's just France. Oh. We love the French. We always have to say that as well. Yeah. It's not serious. We do love the French.
If you're American and you don't know why the English and the French take the piss out of each other, like there are whole history books about European history that will tell you why.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know how if you've got a friend who's a bit of a dickhead, right, and you're out with him drunk in a bar, and like somebody's having a pop at him, and you're like, look, he is an idiot, but he's my idiot.
Yeah,
only I get.
We
to tell
can
him
make
he's an
fun
idiot.
of each other
because the French and I, the French,
you and the French,
specifically me and the entirety of France. No, the English and the French have such a long intertwined history that I feel like we are allowed. We've earned that right because
we're next door neighbours.
Well, we're quite French and they're quite English
compared to the rest of Europe and the West.
There's been a lot of cultural exchange between us and the French over the years, and by cultural exchange, what I actually mean is invasion.
Invasion, both militarily and sports fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh god, yeah.
But the French are getting the far worse end of the stick on that, on the sports fans.
Yeah, our football fans are our soccer fans.
Worst in the world, I would say. Worst. Well, I think in some Latin American countries, they sometimes kill players for missing strikes or goals or whatever.
But that's mostly the cartels, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. Or it could just be the average people. I don't know enough to know, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know enough about South American football.
No, not at all. The best response to someone without super speed claiming to have super speed is what Thomas Wayne said to Barry which was the line, you weren't fast enough to avoid that, you delusional son of a bitch, after punching him. I thought that was a good line.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I will concede that Old Man Wayne, Thomas Wayne,
yes,
quite a good character.
Yeah, he was a fun character.
Like he was as bitter. He was as bitter as somebody who has lost their son should be.
Yes.
And he's the only character whose motivations I fully understood. Because he was very quick to jump on board with Barry. Even though the whole time...
berating him the entire time.
Yeah, the whole time he was saying, well, nothing you've told me proves what you're saying. But also it's like somebody who's just found out that the son they've been grieving for a large portion of their life should have survived in their place, and actually there's a way for them to give their life to theirs.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that person is probably going to take some pretty drastic measures.
I kind of like, and I do think there is some good writing here in terms of like the plotting out of, maybe not the story, but like characters as interactions.
That one character. I'll give him that. That one character was well written.
And that's why they brought that character back, probably.
Yeah, can we do another, we can. The next time.
You know what he's in? The Batman Run by Tom King. Almost
so
certain.
we can do the Tom King Batman run that has him in. The next time you make me do a superhero,
yeah, we'll add it.
Can I have more Thomas Wayne?
Yes,
because I liked Thomas Wayne.
Yeah.
I also really liked his bat costume.
Yeah, so it's a more violent looking version, isn't it?
Well, but it had the grey thing going on, which reminds me of the like early Batman. You know, when it was kind of grey and navy and not all armored. He almost had a bit of the Adam West Batman.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I liked it.
What I liked about him was, like, I only just realized this when you were talking about him, is you can tell, I think, that he has this hope of bringing his son back.
Yeah.
But he's not willing to admit he has hope, even maybe to himself. So he's following along. He's following along for the obvious reason of maybe this will result in this. But he's almost not even telling himself. He's not even admitting to himself that there's a possibility. It's only when Flash is losing memories, he's like, you have to remember Bruce. And that's like he's forced to admit what his goal is.
And there's something frantic in him at that point, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the one thing that they do and the one character that kind of makes some of this plot make sense. Because to be honest with you, for most of this comic book, Barry and Batman Sr. bumble about doing ill-advised, stupid shit.
Well, I mean, freeing Superman was a good idea. Like, it didn't pan out as well as they hoped.
If you think about it, right? Again, Barry is still working from the assumption that the person that has been locked up in that basement is going to be Clark Kent. And he said, oh, well, whatever happened, he's going to be good. And it's like, no, Clark Kent is Clark Kent because of the sum of his experience, not because he is a magical alien man that fell from the sky.
Yeah.
And again, quite ill-advised.
But then even if you anticipate what he's going to be like, having been in captivity his entire life, if you're the people who free him, that's a pretty good chance of like, hey, look, you were in captivity. Well, we've just freed you. So can you give us a hand? Like, help us out?
Also, that's my other issue, is that Superman fucks off. And then with no warning, we don't even see Superman return. There is just a panel of him punching somebody.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, Superman's back.
But Flash did tell you he was coming back.
Right. You said, do you know what?
He said, he'll be back. Just when we need him, he'll be back.
He said a lot of things in this comic.
Yeah, but that turned out true. So
what was the deal with Lois Lane?
So she's an investigative reporter. So she obviously went to Themyscira, being a woman, to blend in, to report on what was going on.
But she's not super.
No. And that's a canon staple. She's always on super, gets by on her wits, and
I'm familiar with Lois Lane. Like, I'm familiar.
But then she's not super then.
Well, I know, but the thing is, she was in Themyscira and she was doing some pretty hardcore shit, and I was like, is she super here? Because we only see her once. We hear about her a lot.
Yeah,
we see her in one panel, mate.
I assume from not being mentioned being super, you just assumed she's the same as always. At least I did.
Yeah, well, I didn't know what to assume, did I? That's the thing.
One thing that affected my reading of this comic, and I wanted to kind of say this near towards the end of of other things to reference. So
was it me bitching about it constantly?
no, I'm loving that. That's it. I'm enjoying that for sure. I years ago watched the animated movie of this. So this comic was turned into like a DC animated film, and it was this kind of story, which didn't actually. Normally, they need to condense comic stories for like a 90-minute animated film. This was pretty much almost exactly.
Was it all filler?
Yeah, it was basically close. One of the differences, which I was surprised here, was because I know the story because I saw a different version of it. So what happens in the animated film is pretty much all the same, but Thomas Wayne has and uses guns and shoots and kills people. So in this, he does allow someone to drop and die, like in the alley where Bruce died. So he's got that.
And
but
he always takes them to that alley. It's his little, like, do you know how a bird of prey has a plucking post?
I can guess based on context.
A bird of prey will have its territory over which it presides, and then it will have a specific and historic plucking post, which is the place it takes its prey back to pull its innards out and eat it.
Yeah.
And Batman in
doing
this,
the same.
Yeah, no, it's a bit sociopathic. It's a bit serial killery.
Well, yeah, and I think
it's the
that
third one in that alley this week, Chief.
That was actually
I mean?
that was actually a quite subtle showing of that. Whereas what I was expecting was a bit more of an overt, but still, like, I think clever thing.
Just bodies piling up in the fucking alley.
Him using guns specifically.
Yeah.
So Bruce is adverse to guns because they killed his parents. Whereas I think Thomas Wayne has like he goes the opposite way for the same reasons. He goes in well, if guns killed my family, I'm going to use guns to kill every criminal. Yeah. Like if they died, then everyone else is going to die the same way. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting that was adapted. That was changed in the adaptation for the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we've pretty much covered like the big beats. I mean, a lot of my notes are just like little things which I thought were good. One other big part of art which I thought was really good was the scene with the lightning and the chair and everything. I thought that panel layout, that was a good part. I think that was the part where the artist was like, I'm gonna have a bit of creative fun here and make this look good. And it was a pivotal scene, so it makes sense.
This is one thing that actually I must admit, when I read DC comics particularly, I kind of noticed it in Supergirl and I noticed it again in this. Might just be because they've been doing it for a long time and they've found a formula, but the layouts are always pretty good.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, most of the layout was formulaic, but in a we know what works kind of way.
They do the thirds thing, but then they break the middle third up into a rolling thing that goes like half of that middle third is one panel and then it goes round to two smaller panels on the right and then you're back round to the bottom third.
Yeah.
And that scans relatively well. And I suppose this is something that actually, when you've got more creative control from a writer, an art direction perspective, people start to play with it a bit more. And it's one of the places that small, like, the graphic novels that I really like will sometimes fall down, is that the panel layouts are sometimes not as good. Whereas it did scan well. I must admit, it did scan well, didn't it?
And I did like in those shorter thirds or shorter sections, some of them, when the lightning was striking, had the big glowing letters in the background of like boom. I think I didn't even read what the proper letters were, but it got across that like big sound happening in the background.
There's a lot of boom pow whack still in DC Comics, isn't there?
Yeah, but I think this is a much better use of them. Like it was literally in the background of that entire square, so it made it feel like a big noise.
But I suppose that's a convention of the genre, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think the modern version is a bit better used. There wasn't like punch, bam, pow, or the old one from the Adam West one day when they went pam, punch, wank. God,
did it really?
I think an American was like, that sounds like someone's beating. It's like beating something. Yeah,
it does. Yeah, I mean, I get it.
I wasn't sure how to feel about the story of two global superpowers whose war may cause the end of the world. Yeah. Because right now might be a bit close to home.
Yeah, fucking A.
But Burnt Up Barry, like that, like art, I thought was like done well enough to be kind of jarring. Like you go from like he's all burnt up and then he's all in bandages, and to see a superhero like that, I think that's almost kind of akin to like Batman getting his back broken. Except for this got resolved fairly quickly.
Wasn't it Bane who did that?
Yes.
Hey.
But yeah, well done. Gold star. But
can you put just a single gold star with no reference on the thumbnail for this episode, because I got a gold star this episode.
If I remember, and I probably will because I'll be editing this and then make the thumbnail. If I remember, I will.
If you can also add a Mario coin noise to the moment that I say the thing that gets me a
now
gold
you're
star,
asking too much.
then you will get a gold star in the next episode for your editing.
Bloody, you're taking a mile here now.
Well,
If I remember and if I can be asked, those are the two prime
I want
factors.
my gold star.
I'll do the star if I remember.
I want a gold star.
I think most of the most positive notes that we both have are about Thomas Wayne, which again explains why he was the character that was brought back from all this. I like how Thomas Wayne adds an emotional beat about, obviously trying to reunite with Bruce or at least save him and pray him. And then I like how that's flipped very soon after when it then becomes, if we can't save Bruce, I'm letting the world end. Because it's either we save him or fuck everything else. So I like the contrast of he's like trying to save his son. How noble. And oh no, it's gone bad. He's too in depth. He's too goal oriented on this specific one to just let the world burn otherwise. Which I thought was a good beat to the story as well.
Ultimately, unfortunately, didn't like it.
That's fair.
I mean, and you know what? I would like to tack this on the end that I don't know if I said this on mic or off mic. This is garbage. But that's not necessarily a critique.
I mean, it's in your words, it's garbage, but that has netted us an hour plus conversation because there's so much to talk about it.
But
I think
also
interesting garbage is better than boring garbage.
It's garbage, but it's just not my garbage.
Yeah.
Like if you went through my Netflix history, a lot of garbage.
Yeah.
If you looked at like the pulpy mid 20th century novels I used to read to wind down when I was a student, that's garbage, but it's my garbage.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think you put it really well when you said that a bad wrestling match would be, somebody who's not into wrestling would watch a bad wrestling match and be like, that's garbage.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody who's into it would watch it and go, oh, that's wrestling, right?
Well, I specifically said they would agree that's garbage, but they would at least have the interest of breaking down what didn't work, why it couldn't be a good match, like what's the difference.
And I think a lot of what I don't like about this is unfortunately conventions of the comic book of the superhero comic book genre.
Yeah.
And it's things that the superhero stories that I've really enjoyed. A great example is the Supergirl comic that we read, or the Alan Moore Superman.
Yep.
Which I actually quite liked, didn't I?
Yeah. Or Rogue Sun,
or to a certain degree Watchmen. They're all comic books, they're all superhero stories that don't really follow that pattern. Whereas this, we plucked a random DC comic from 10 years ago? More than 10 years ago, Jesus Christ. From 12 years ago, and just stuck me in the middle at the end of probably decades of DC before the reboot that this prompted.
Yep.
And went, go on, then see what you think of it. And so it makes sense that I wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
It wasn't for me, was it?
No. And to be fair, I think the main point in terms of like how we're assessing it is this is not the superhero literate podcast. This is the comic literate podcast. So we are comparing it to the best comics and the good comics that we've read. And I think and again, I'm adding if you're into superheroes, then this means this, or this is good because of that. But, and again, why you're not coming in with that same reference is ultimately we've got to judge it as if you're a comic book fan, not a superhero fan, but just a comic book fan, you're a fan of the medium of comics, what do you think picking this up and reading it?
Yeah, and it's the same as like, if you are into film, when you are looking for a cinematic experience, you're probably not going to jump in the middle and go, I'm just going to watch Fast 5.
Yeah.
You're gonna go through the list of Sundance winners from that year and say, this got an award at the Sundance Film Festival. This is probably going to be good.
Yeah.
And it's the same, isn't it? When you know, as a casual comic book fan, I sometimes think that the graphic novels and the limited series that aren't part of this huge canonical experiment that DC and Marvel have been doing for the past 100 years are going to be so much more rewarding because you can just enjoy it for what it is. Yeah, and that's really difficult here. And so I am really unfair to superhero comics. And I think part of that is just that I don't understand them.
If anything, I would actually say you're more fair to superhero comics than a superhero fan like myself who has the bias of already enjoying the genre. I'd say you're more fair because you're comparing it to other comics and not to other superhero comics. And yeah, again, in the same way, if any film is compared to other films, people be like, well, it's not as good as my favorite film. But if a big blockbuster Fast and Furious comes out, people who aren't that fond of film will go like, well, it had all explosions and chase scenes and it was cool. Like that's all they're going for. They're not going for a good film. They're going for just an experience.
And I think it's really interesting because we live in an age now where everything is elevated to the status of high art by a small community that exists on the internet.
There's a Fast and Furious aficionados who are like, the 5 is the best one, though.
There will be a subreddit for them, and there is a place for that community to congregate, and there is a place for that community to, you know, really dig deep into what they find compelling about that media. This stuff was never meant to be high art.
No.
These, you know, this is a storytelling tradition that has its origins in inky comics that were printed on pulpy paper that you could give to children to keep them quiet in the 1950s when people started to have disposable income.
Yep. Exactly.
That is where this shit comes from. And does something like this serve that niche? And it does. Like, you could give this to a 10-year-old and they would look at it and go, haven't got a scoop what's going on, but look at that.
Yeah. Oh,
and I imagine
he's got a sword and he's super fast, and that's what they would enjoy.
And I imagine that's, you know, you could give this to a child and they would look at the same things that I've looked at and not found compelling, go, wow, and then become a lifelong superhero comic fan and become that new generation of people who are going to go, oh, well, actually, he's always had a large penny in the back cave. Do you know what I mean? And so it's despite my protestations that it's not good and that I don't like it, and I've pulled out a million reasons why I didn't enjoy it and why I didn't find anything compelling in it, I'm not really who it's for. A 30-year-old man who isn't a huge comic book fan or a huge superhero comic book fan, I'm not the person this has been written for. Yeah. No, I'm just not the person. And I think that's my issue with superhero comics. And maybe it's a deficiency in me. Maybe I should have been watching more Saturday morning Spider-Man cartoons when I was a kid, and actually now I would have this huge corpus of material that I could sit and enjoy in adulthood.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But then my counter-argument to your own self-assessment is, I would say, when you fairly and honestly give your opinion on something like this title, it adds weight to when you like Supergirl, Women of Tomorrow, or anything by Moore, or whatever. It adds more weight when it's like, not only is it a good superhero comic, but it also, additionally, stands on its own as just a comic book title.
Like a great story.
Exactly. And that's what this podcast, I think, is ultimately about, is highlighting what does achieve that and what doesn't.
And I suppose this is, you know, get too philosophical about it, but I'm fucking gonna, because that's who I am as a human being.
So it's the literature part of it, of the podcast, I guess.
There's a line from 8 Million Genies that stuck with me. They said, last time round they all wanted to be gods. This time they want to be superheroes. It's the same thing, really.
Yeah, it's the modern mythology.
Yeah, and
with its shared universes and stories, and
and do you know what? To somebody who doesn't go to that church, you kind of sit outside and listen to everyone preaching and go, it's a bit fucking weird, mate.
Yeah,
but that's what it is, isn't it? It's mythology and it's power fantasies, and there's certain power fantasies that I really have enjoyed. Like, I love the Bond novels. they are pulpy, they are power fantasies, and I find something compelling in them. Like the Sharp novels, again, it's a power fantasy that I find compelling. And so, you know, it does serve a purpose culturally. I just wish it wasn't the dominant culture.
Yeah, and that's, to be fair, like we're seeing that now with superhero fatigue in films in general.
Yeah.
Problem is that's not going anywhere because they still make a lot of money, and occasionally there's a good one that, coming from a comic book fan, occasionally there's a good one where everyone goes, oh, it's back to normal now, it's all great now.
And that's the era that we come from, isn't it?
Yeah. That's all right. I mean, I was going to mention one last point, which is, interestingly, this is one of the few where I didn't mention the writer or artist. And the only reason the only reason is because I wanted to make it kind of a part of a larger point, which was this was written by a guy named Geoff Johns.
Yeah.
So Geoff Johns, if you are into superhero comics, you already know that name because around this time, literally about a year beforehand, he became the like creative director of DC. To the point where people were like, is this going to affect your writing? Because you're meant to be doing some like big titles like Flashpoint in a year or whatever. And he was like, no, I'll be fine. I'll do both. So he was pretty much the creative driving force for DC following this. Yeah. And not just following this, but also this comic being, as I mentioned earlier, the canonical retcon of the DC universe. So this led into the New 52.
Was that well received?
It was kind of, I will say it was kind of not well received, but this is the reception being of superhero fans who don't like when things change. Right. So there were comic runs that were cancelled, possibly even mid-run, to reset. So the entire universe had to reset.
Wow.
And then you had people obviously criticizing, well, this isn't as good as what we had before, or that kind of stuff. And there was still some good stuff in there. But the point is that the person who wrote this comic, and had written a bunch of DC before. He was a big Justice League guy. Yeah. He wrote some of Green Lantern's like biggest comics, like Brightest Day is a well-known one that he wrote. But he was the kind of driving force after that. And I think the DC especially did kind of homogenize to his creative style after this. And that did involve another reset further down the line. Now, whether that's the fault of his creative direction or whether that is just how superhero comics are now, where they do have to reboot every once in a while.
Yeah.
It could be either or. But I thought it was at least interesting that one of the reasons this is so interesting to me as a superhero fan is this is, again, a flashpoint of a change in superhero writing and culture, if that makes sense. So it's interesting for a lot of different reasons. It was also penciled by Andy Kubert, who, again, you know, we've
did
touched
a relatively
on.
good job.
Did a relatively good job. But I think Geoff Johns is very interesting. He's also just recently gone back to DC and he's doing Flashpoint Beyond. So it's Thomas Wayne again.
He's doing it again.
Yeah, and it's Thomas Wayne again on the cover. So it's that he's doing the best part of this story again.
Yeah, okay.
Bloody 12 plus years later.
Well, isn't that the way with this stuff?
Yeah. It's never ending, and
it's circuitous is the word I'd use for it.
And there'll always be content for us. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I don't know if it's the Big Bang Theory effect, but there's this idea that nerd culture is intrinsically linked.
It's a big part of it, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it doesn't really register. Like I think there's so much more nerd culture as it exists, but in the noughties and you know in the noughties and teenies, we don't really have a name for the 2010 to 2019. Yeah, there's no good name for it, which is really interesting because of course we didn't have a great name for it in the 20th century either, because it was just World War II. 1914 to 1918, you know what I mean?
World War One.
Yeah, World War One, sorry. The Great War.
At the time, they're like, World War One. It's like, why are you adding the one? Like, you'll see.
They called it the Great War back then.
Yeah.
You know that. And so, that nerd culture became comic book culture. And I kind of think that there's so much more to it. There's like sci-fi and fantasy novels and classic video games.
We're going to get into all that comes in comic book form, which I think we are going to be able to present to the audience and show these other aspects within this specific medium. And I think that's going to be, it has been interesting and it will continue to be interesting. On that note,
thank you for listening. if you would like to explain to me why the Shazam kid had a tiger, you can send us an email at comicliterate@gmail.com. You'd like to leave us a review, just wherever you are currently listening to this podcast, scroll down to the comment section and explain to me all of the reasons why
Thomas Wayne.
why Clark Kent's dad was not a Nazi,
Yeah.
and why Flashpoint is the pinnacle of human endeavor.
And if your app, and I've noticed this a lot, some of the apps don't have the review function.
Yeah.
If you do have that, then you can just pop along to Spotify or Apple Podcasts
Or Pocket Cast.
or Pocket Casts or Amazon Podcasts. Any of those, either send us a review or leave a review, give a 5-star, take a screenshot, send it to us, call us names, and we'll read them out on the air.
We'll read that shit out, baby.
Of course.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.